Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this impromptu kind of chat about something that has been a really big part of both of our lives at different times. And just kind of wanted to open up the door on this conversation in a way that felt for me like safe, because this lady is very safe for me to kind of like, or has shown to be very safe to explore all types of ideas and different methods or modes of thinking. So without further ado, I will introduce Erin. Hello, Erin. Thank you so much for just coming to chat with me about religion, because Saturn is in Pisces, as you know, and I think that that's just kind of making like the drum beat of religion in my eyes. Like, and I felt it too before Saturn went into Pisces on March 7th. I felt this like drum beat of religion getting like louder and louder. And I know that it wasn't just me, because you and I talked about it. So how are you doing today, girl?
I'm doing awesome, and I just wanted to share something really quick. Speaking the
Fine.
drumbeat of religion, right? I was
Yeah.
driving earlier today, running a few errands, and right down in my little town that I live in, as I was heading right across the border. Well, I was in South Carolina, but um, there's a parade on March 25th here, right? Like as we're doing this, it's the 15th, right, of March. So on the
The
25th,
Ides of March.
guess what it's called? March for Jesus.
No, seriously? Wait, seriously? Because there's like a literal, like ritualistic, like holiday that goes along with this, the Ides of March, like right now. So it's just super. I'm
Yeah.
sure that like on that local level, like they have no idea, but it's just like really interesting. Like when we get these ideas to do,
Yeah, I thought it
these
was really
things,
interesting.
why
I
do
was
we?
like, whoa. And I was sharing with my son, like what we were doing, as far as talking about this. And I was like, this is so interesting, because it wasn't up last year. I've been here for over a year and it wasn't last year they didn't do this. So it's like, huh, that's funny to me. At least I don't remember seeing it. But yeah, it's
I
interesting.
think that one of the things that like really cemented in like my desire to chat about all of this with you, because there's so many places that we can go. I saw that the Ashbury revival was happening like in Alabama, and there was like a really big like like sort of like an energetic groundswell of revival. Though I think what's interesting about that is like scripturally, like if we want to like, because I love like looking at the Bible and all of that stuff, and so scripturally there's no like scripture to support like a big revival at this time. But however, there's a fuck ton of scripture to support a false revival. So yeah, so I want to ask you just to kind of like dig into this a little bit, the meat and potatoes of this meal that we are making together. I wanted to ask you about like your journey into just like different religions and seeking and like different faiths, different traditions, because I know like when we became friends, that was one of the primary things that we bonded over. So if you want to share that, I would be happy to
Sure.
hear
Well, I
about
think it gives people, whoever's watching this too, an idea of like, we're not just coming on, we're not bashing religion, we're not bashing Jesus, we're not bashing Christianity or any other religion. We're just coming from it from a experience point of view and from an astrological point of view, and getting curious about what may be coming even through the eyes of history as well too. So
that.
so yeah, so now I'd be happy to share. So I guess I mean I'll just kind of briefly go into like growing up. I grew up in a family that really wasn't super religious. However, I was always one that was curious. I remember being at a Pizza Hut when I was a kid with my brother and my parents, and there was like a group of three or four other people in a booth that was like next to us. And they were talking about God and they were talking about religion and they were just all these things. And I was fascinated. I was like, one ear was, to this, I was maybe 8. I
Mm.
don't know. I was young. And I remember my parents though saying, "Oh, that's so weird." Like totally like getting really uneasy around that, hearing that conversation, because when I was growing up, right, this would have been in the early to mid 80s. Um, religion wasn't talked about. It was you had a Bible maybe, but you kept it up on the shelf and you went to church on Sundays.
Right.
if you did, and it was, you don't talk about it outside of that though. It was just like, I mean, that was just Midwestern kind of, I grew up in South Dakota. That was what you did. So anyway, but I was like, I remember being fat, and I still remember it to this day, right? And it's been like almost 40 years later. So anyways, again though, we went to church mainly, Christmas and Easter growing up, and for social things, hanging out with friends and whatnot. So it was more of an ideal than a actual like journey that I grew up with. It was like, oh, you just do this because you do it, but not really like because your soul is like desiring something that's like deeper, within yourself. So when I got to be, I moved out to Seattle in 2000, so I would have been probably early to mid 20s. And I was like, I want to know what more is out there. And I was like that, getting into conversations with friends too, even in high school and whatnot. I was
Sure.
kind of looking at the deeper things of life, getting curious. But anyway, so yeah, so got into the whole thing. I started more into spirituality. Well, then a good friend of mine was like, no, it's not of God, all that kind of stuff. So then I got into Christianity very, very deeply. I was sent different books,
Mm,
um,
okay.
audio, and I got just like hooked. It was just like, oh, because I was looking, right? I was seeking something that I knew there was more than what I was living, that I was seeing, that I was feeling, that I was like, I knew there was more. I didn't know what that was, but I knew there was more. So I was like hungry,
Yeah.
for something. And so we joined a church out there and whatnot, all this stuff. And so moved back to South Dakota after having babies, and like one baby and then two on the way, not like multiple, but after having a dozen babies. No,
Having like hundreds of babies.
yeah, yeah, right. So no, but then I got into this one church in South Dakota, and oh man, like it was very, very deep political church, and very, very, very conservative, very
Yeah.
and I ended up working there as well too, and I was working in the children's ministry, and so I was on staff. And because I was a 6'2", right, because I do human design, I'm like, 6'2s can't just skim the surface. It's like, I gotta go all in, I gotta work here, I gotta get into it, to like know what this is, right? And so I experienced it from that side, and I saw a lot of ugliness as well. I saw a lot of beauty too, but just humanness, right? And so I um I went to a revival when I worked there, down in Todd Bentley revival, down in Lakeland, Florida. If anybody's listening knows what that was about. Rick Joyner was part of it. He fell from grace, what they say, anyway, it's a long story, but it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was very, very mystical though, like Christianity in a way. It was very political, but it was very mystical. We did fire tunnels, and it was a lot of like speaking in tongues and stuff like that. Just a lot of, so anyway, I loved that aspect of it. Anyway, just because it was more mystical, and then ended up leaving the church though in 2009. Won't go into it all, but it was just not a good, healthy situation in a lot of ways. Very cult kind of like situation. And so then,
Yeah.
left there. We started doing a group of different people who had left that church, Bible study every weekend, and it was awesome. I loved it. I loved the gathering. I loved researching. I loved getting into it. Well, then it started to kind of go towards more Judaism, and so because we were in the what we call Old Testament, whatever we want to call that, and so anyway, I got really interested, and so I thought, all right, I'm going to work. I really want to learn about this, and so I started working with a rabbi in Jerusalem, online, like 2-3 days a week, and we went and visited Orthodox Jews in Denver and in Houston. Almost moved to Denver to be in like with to do that, to like actually convert to Orthodox Judaism. I mean, we were like that serious about it, and it's quite a process, and it's quite cumbersome, but left like the whole spiritual thing really basically in 2015, or not the spiritual thing, but left the whole religion thing in 2015 finally. And I'm like, these are all like cliff notes basically of my journey. But what I realized is, I came back to really where I was, in like 2001 in 2015, where I was like, oh, I'm coming back to just like this spirituality of like, who am I? There is a bigger force out there. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to pretend that I even know what it is because I don't know. But I know there's something. And I was trying to define it and I was trying to put it in a box. And I think that's going to be so much of what this whole time is going to be too, is trying to define and, trying to have structure to it all, where there is no structure to spirituality. It just is.
Right.
And so, but one of the biggest questions I had is, as far as the whole Jesus thing, I would get so offended when people would say anything negative about Jesus or God, because I was told that like if you question anything, you're going to go to hell. That was really what it was.
Yeah.
And because I grew up Catholic also, for a little while in my life, and so that was kind of the whole thing. And so, but I remember asking myself the question, I want the truth no matter where it's going to take me. And it was really,
Yes.
yeah, it was really referring to Jesus. And I remember where I said it, like the first time I said it, and I was sitting at my counter in my kitchen, and I started listening to another rabbi that I was listening to a lot. Tobias Singer is his name. And I was like, all right, like I'm going to challenge this belief that I've always thought of Jesus. What if he's not who he says he was? What if he's not who even I was told who he was? What if he's not, who is this person? Is he even a person? All of those things, like, or is it just a concept? Is it an idea? Is it a higher version of myself? Is it all who, whatever, like,
Oh yeah.
what does this mean? And that was one of the biggest fears, right? And so I think that that's what I've encountered, I guess, is it's the fear of, because of the programming and the conditioning, which is going to be very almost militant now, coming into
Oh,
this
that's
space.
how it feels. Yeah, that's how it feels to me too.
Yeah, so that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. Now I don't know who Jesus is. I don't hate the dude, or the energy, whatever. I don't know, I don't know, and I'm okay with being in that I don't know, you know. Because I don't know, and I think we all have our own, journey, and we'll get into that later, but yeah, that's my journey in a nutshell. So yeah.
I just have to tell you that right now, my landlord is literally like, I don't know if you can hear him or not. And like, please let me know, but he's right outside with a like some type of machinery, leaf blower, chain. Like it's like something like, I don't know. I don't even know what it is, to be honest, but it's like he's trimming hedges or I don't know. So I just want to let you know that it's like, it's real here, like for some reason to talk about this. So yeah, no, all of that makes sense. And I really appreciate you sharing, your journey. And I'd love to share with you for a moment, if you don't mind, my journey. I grew up Catholic and I was like the ninth house person who wouldn't shut the fuck up and like wouldn't stop asking questions, right? Like in faith formation, and why can't women be da 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 da, and and all of these questions that I had. And it was just kind of like, Meredith, shut up. Like, come on, like we're all trying to go home, like whatever, like we're just trying to have this be like an easy peasy thing. And I think I was maybe too young to understand that energy. It was like I was a little zealous. Like I can understand like what you say when because there's just like this like zest for God, or like zest for there's a like a thirst that is like not quenched by like material existence, right? That's kind of how I equate it. It's like, and I was like, I'm parched, like I need. And so definitely didn't resonate with Catholicism for obvious reasons, and actually ended up like going back and like energetically undoing like my confirmation and all of my sacraments, because I feel that there's such a strong like allegiance to something that isn't very godly, right, within the Catholic Church. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, so I fell into like a fundamentalism type of thing. It wasn't as much political. It was kind of more like love is the law a little bit, but then it was also like very much had a fundamentalist sort of like shame inducing, at least for me at the time, sort of been to it. And Yeah, and I felt like it was like one of the worst times of my life, honestly, or like it helped to kind of like fuel that, like whatever that was going on with me at the time. So,
How
yeah,
old
and then huh?
how old were you at this time?
I was like, I think I was like 14 to like 16 or 17 when I went through that experience. And then I started practicing yoga when I was like 16. I fucking hated it too. Oh my God. I was like, get away from me. Like just the idea of like being in my body and like feeling so, but after like a few years where I was really like kind of correcting a lot of issues, problems, like mental problems that I had at the time, I felt that like it was so I can remember like being 18, having practiced yoga for a few years and, kind of really maybe I'm slow, maybe it's me, but just like the movement of like the breath with the body, like just kind of like really like sunk in. I was like, oh gosh, this is wild. And I feel like I'm creating a lot of space in my universe. So so then I went on to sort of like have this split in my consciousness between this like very like I had a very scientific or like cerebral phase where I was like conducting research in college. And so I was really super dialed into like wanting to make sure that things were like validated and like whatever else. Meanwhile, I'm having this like qualia in my body that I can't like really can't really fathom, can't really put down, can't gaslight myself and minimize my experience. And even though I tried to be super like, objective, like cerebral centered or whatever, I was trying to be that way. And then I remember still being like the woo woo crazy girl just kind of in my cohort or whatever for like wanting to help people using just sort of like water and sunshine type of methods. And so I guess I don't know, so I went on to sort of like it was like I was kind of going forward with like my studies while also kind of like taking these ginormous steps back from materialism, even though I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. And just to give anybody listening who is not aware, I'm not talking about consumerism. I am just talking about like this fundamental belief in our culture that, the universe is chaos and everything is so random, like there's no divine order, like, and it is focused primarily on like the physical and the observable physical reality. Like that's kind of I think that that's where we found ourselves like as a whole, like as a culture and as a society. So, even according to like some of the mystics of like the 1800s that I'm really big on like, looking into and researching at this point in my life, like it just doesn't seem like anything religious that comes up or even like spiritual that's like very much like too good to be true or like offers this like way out or like whatever that is like it's kind of consensus and prophecy back before a certain point that for this age for like the end of this sort of like materialist age that we find ourselves in, it's just not like like it's good to have, your wits about you with regard to things like this. So I graduated from college. I was applying for my PhD. I really wanted to do research with people and, was wanting to become a psychologist. And then I was offered at Okra a position reading astrology charts. Like they offered, they invited me as it goes. You know how it goes because nothing ever works unless I have like the solid, just like this, like we see your gift and ability and like we want to give you just like a space and a platform. And so I did that for a while. And obviously, like, there's some things when you are like delving into yoga, energy anatomy, and astrology, there's just like, and even I can say this too about the conspiracy world that like there's something that leads you towards this like trust in the ever present divine intelligence that just is the isness of that is, and So I was just, yeah, trying to reconcile all of the academic stuff and like all of the sciencey stuff with, I mean, and that ship is so sailed. I was telling my new friend that I was hanging out with earlier today. I was like, I'm anti-science, actually. I'm like a like bona fide, like an anti-science person. Anyway, so yeah, so just feel free to share any of your reflections, and then maybe we can like, take this conversation in like a couple new interesting places, because I definitely
Yeah.
fuck, I can feel that there's so much like depth here, like to, to share about, and what we're noticing, and like that this will likely turn into like more than one conversation. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like just how you had said something, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I feel like oh, I know what you're saying, something about that I wanted to reflect on, like the way out, right? Like there's going to be, right, and that's like such a Pisces thing. It's like, ooh, I want out, or I want to like leave this world. I want to, right? I want to
Yeah.
escape, right? And it's like,
Right.
I think though with Saturn here too, I mean, I think it could go several ways, and it may go so many different ways as well too. But I really feel like it's like it's about there's nothing like, religion in the past is like, yeah, you just believe this. It's like take a pill and you'll be better, right? Take the Jesus pill, right, and you're saved. And I feel like this is going to be really about like, no, it's about taking responsibility for our beliefs. Why do we believe what we're believing, right? Do we really own them? Are they just like passed down to us, right? We can think about even it from a karmic kind of, cyclical type of way as well too. Do we have to break anything, right? Like you're saying with even Catholicism, like you're breaking some of those ties, right? I think there's so many aspects of this. I feel like it's interesting. I've even been paying attention to my own curiosities lately to see how the energy is affecting me, and I've been very much like, I'm like, just recently even like cults like have been really like interesting to me, and I've always kind of like,
Yeah.
they've always intrigued me,
Same.
but even more so I see so many more documentaries about especially like on Hulu and stuff. So
Mhm.
I feel like we're gonna see so many things
Girl,
around.
you know it. You know it. You already know it. And yeah, like, yeah, you already know. And I actually like, this is part of what I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And we can go into it, like I want to like really split this apart, because I think that when you do observe, like, okay, so, you said a couple of things in there that are really juicy about, Saturn and Pisces. And I think about Pisces, and I think about like humanity's origin story, and like some of the core wounds that like exist within that, right? And like I think about, like the fall of Atlantis, or like the fall of like ancient civilizations, where like we did give our power away to an external savior, and like, how that kind of like has impacted us. And like, and I think that there's something in the human genome, or like the human species, that just desperately wants to be saved, like desperately needs to, or wants to be rescued. And if it's not that, then maybe to rescue or save another. And I think that, yeah, and I think that it's interesting, it does take us out of our personal responsibility to like be in that, to be in that space. And I think that a savior is like a dangling carrot, like that just keeps kind of like getting like moved back. I mean, that's, so I'm not like, we're not with that. But with regard to the whole like the cult thing,
Mhm.
one of the things you can tell that I'm like winding up. One of the things that I've noticed is that there are a lot of people recently, like within the last few years. And, I have also felt this way, that there's something very biblical, or very like, there is the end of something. Like we are definitely most certainly seeing, like whether it's like the quantum compression that like Terence McKenna talks about, we're seeing like a shifting around of the time system, a changing of the guard. Like there's definitely something happening. And so I think it's like silly to like gaslight Christians for being like, it's the end of days, because damn it, it looks like it. Like, look at the books, like look at like prophecy, and like it really does look like it, right? So, so I don't want to gaslight anyone or myself out of like thinking that, right? At the same time, though, I feel that because of the observable presence of like open rule evil out here, that it's very much more easy due to like the amount of light, I guess, that's coming into the realm. It's like much easier to see people see things clearly, right? Even though there is a lot of deception, but on some level you can kind of see people like for who they are and like for like what they're bringing, right? And so that's scary. Like, as someone who has looked in the face of like evil entities and things like this, like, I know like what evil like or that like energy feels like. And so I think about, how easy it is to reflexively like go from one paradigm just to another, and just to put all of your eggs in that basket and all of your hope in that. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about with that is like the new age movement to Christianity to like funneled right into the like, and there are different kinds of Christianity that I've observed. Like the people that I actually know that have like a relationship with Jesus that's like personal, they almost work with it like any other pagan might work with deity or something like
Yeah.
this, like, and it's a relationship because that's how it works. Like the spirit world is not a vending machine. The spirit world is not a like, you know what I'm saying? You have to have a relational component to your like spirituality or else it might not work, so or do what you want it to do in your life, so I see a lot of people that are like genuine Christians that have that genuine relationship. They interact with me very differently from people who are like telling me that like my existence is demonic because I'm making like simmer pots and like floor washes and you know what I'm saying? It's like I think that what I've observed over the last few years is what witchcraft, like as it, or like the demonic, like negative side of whatever that is, like I've seen how that's shown up in the world, like, and have seen how it showed up in medicine and have seen how it's shown up in media and like these types of things. And so I've done nothing but mostly try to help people on that psychic level since this all started. And so I just come up with like this resentment for
Yeah.
hearing that my existence is demonic. And, and meanwhile, these people are praying for the rapture. They're praying for the destruction of this beautiful creation. And
Yeah.
so, I'm like, why don't you just like stop doing that and like do something, So these are my thoughts. They obviously come from somewhere that is like not fully reconciled. So I just do want to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I reflect on that a bit on that? Yeah. So what I can say to that is just from my own experience in that space because I was one of those people before in my day, and so I know what that's like. And when I said about it's about taking responsibility, right, for our beliefs and for our faith and knowing why we believe what we believe and really being secure in that, like really bringing
Yeah.
in that foundation, right, like into our bones, right? Saturn, it's like our bones, right? Like knowing deep down, like to the core, right, of who we are. Well, my experience has been that when I've been in that space where I'm just preaching to people, the kind of the just the kind of like that doesn't feel good to people, right? Nobody wants to be preached to, period. Like they just don't. And on anything, and so but I know when I've now that's happened to me right now since I'm not like in this traditional kind of religious structure, right?
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, like I understand it because I've been there. I've been that energy, and it's really comes from fear. It's not their own beliefs, and they really don't believe really fully what they are saying that they believe, but they feel like they have to because it's fear based because they fear what's going to happen if I don't believe this way. They'll never admit that until they like move past it because I mean if anybody's listening to this, if they are like that's in that they're going to be yelling at me right now or probably cursing my name or whatever, and that's fine because I've been there. I've been in those shoes where, and it really was fear. It was like, I wanted to believe so bad that it was true. I wanted to be so certain in my belief that I had to get other people to believe the same way that I fucking believed. I didn't see it at that time because I'm in it, right? But now I see it. And it's like when we are confident, we take responsibility for our beliefs. It's kind of like what you're saying with these people who have their own relationship. It's because they're in it. It's their
Right.
own relationship.
And
It,
there's
they're
a
they're they're
cohesion,
solid
like
in that.
yeah, like there's a cohesion like in their body. Like I've seen,
Yeah.
I believe that like the Christ energy is like a stream of consciousness or a field of information, and there's like many ways to tap into that. And that I think some people, when they invite, you know how like it's the whole thing of like inviting Jesus into your heart to like, like to make it his, right? That whole concept. Well, I've seen that really like actually transfigure people and like to shift them into just like a whole different part of their lives. So I really feel that there's something to that. And that's something that like I geek out on with like the Steiner material and like, and the field of the heart, and like how like, Steiner talks about how like there's this one part of the human heart that is like the unstruck sound, or like it is the untouched thing by, well, I mean it was, I guess, but it's like the one part that like, the forces that are like putting humanity through an initiation or a paces, a series of paces, can't really touch, or like, you know for somebody who is committed to themselves to that field of information. So I really understand on some level what the fuss is about, because I've had my own like, you know, profound and mystical, Jesus oriented experiences, and I'm sure you have too. So it's just like, yeah, I recognize though that there has been like a Jesus that has been used for control. There's also like a new age Jesus that seems equally false to me. So, like, based on just my own experience of my own, like, relationship, but like there's a new age Jesus that is all about like tolerance and like passivity and just being so languid like a flaccid dick in the face of evil, like, and then and then there's this other like, churchy Jesus that's like the representative of like churchianity, right? And is like,
The
just
warrior Jesus too. I remember hearing teachings that he'll come back, and it's even in Revelation, right? And his robe is drenched, or it's like dripping in blood. You know what I
yeah.
mean? There's this warrior Jesus, there's this pacifist Jesus, and there's everything in between, depending on. But it's all I feel
There's
it's
the obey the government. There's like
thank
a
you. It's so much of what's happening within us,
yeah.
too, of what we're going to be projecting out, what we're needing within ourselves. And this is just the, I guess psychology part of it too, is like, I feel like if we're looking at Jesus to come save us as warrior Jesus, like, well, what part of ourselves haven't we, like, what part of that Mars energy, right? Or Pluto, whatever, both that we haven't accessed for ourselves to go, no, right?
No,
Like,
no. Yeah.
here, right? Like all of that stuff. So I mean, there's so many different like aspects of it. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's what's gonna like this time that we're coming into is gonna be so interesting, and I think it's gonna be so important to not get wrapped up in any belief at all, because it's all gonna change, especially once Saturn hits Aries too. Shit, like it's gonna be like I feel like I don't know.
Such
It's
an intense ingress. Like, if you look at like February of 2026, girl, it goes Saturn into Aries and then Neptune into Aries. And I think that right now, too, like what I was feeling with this Saturn Pisces with like Neptune and Pisces. So Neptune has been in Pisces since 2011. And I think as well, Chiron moved into Pisces around that time and went a full stint in Pisces until 2018. So I'm looking at this and I'm going like, I can see like all of these seeds that have been sown like in people's unconscious of like even the idea of like needing a savior. I would say that even in the last 10 years, like, the human beings have grown to be a lot more helpless and a lot more needing of things. And so, and that's kind of by design, right? So I just yeah, I really felt into this strong, and I've been talking about this privately for so long, but because of like maybe the nature of like what I've stumbled across or like what I've stumbled upon, I've kept it to myself, right? And so that's part of like, inviting you into the space, because I really like, I want to talk about this, but I don't want like, I want it to be in a sort of like container that feels a little bit soft, and like where we're sharing like our own observations and experiences, because yeah, I think that it's it's shaping up to be a political climate where to discuss some of the things that I have on my list, for this conversation are like not like, it's not going to be okay, I think, to talk about them
It's
um,
gonna get
in a way
politically.
that might be a little bit more of a penalization in terms
Yeah.
of censorship than like the jab or, all of these things, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like we're in a position where like these it could get politicized. Religion is going to get politicized, right?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, and yeah, like rules, structure is going to come. Like it has to be this way, it has to look this way, and if it looks outside of this, there will be that. There'll be like a punishment, maybe for that to get people in line, right? And
Right.
and yeah, and I was just telling my son too. I was like, watch, there will be a savior that will emerge in the next. I feel like in the next couple of years, and
Totally.
I feel though. Here's my prediction. This is just me. Like that's not. I've heard that from other people, but so this part of it is mine. I feel that this person's going to come in the spiritual freedom type of movement, and
Yes, girl.
will
I
be
feel
like
it.
very deceiving to people, and like we'll be like, oh, they're for fighting for our cause. That's going to be a big thing, right? It's going to be, we have to fight for a cause, we have to stand for a cause, right? Like Saturn and
My
Pisces.
money is on Russell Brand, by the way. I just want you to know. Like, I'm not saying that he's like, but it's something like that. It's that energy of like, I'm
Yep.
on your side, go
Yep.
team. Because, yeah, that's the whole thing, is like,
And
that
it's,
energy is supposed to be deceptive, right?
yep.
Super like, comes as an angel of light, or, and so that's the whole thing, is like, I want to share this because I think it's really important to make this distinction of like what I believe like prophecy actually even is. Because I see it being like engineered through very heavily this Saturn and Pisces transit. And I think that the Saturn Neptune conjunction in 2025 and 2026 to me look very like one world religion-esque. And so that's like the ultimate like hypothesis, or that's the ultimate conversation that me and Erin are having, right? And so I want to, yeah, to dig into that, because I think that prophecy, like the book of Revelation, or like, some of the like Islamic like end times prophecies, and all of these prophecies are like seemingly the major ones. I wouldn't say, there's certain things like Edgar Cayce or like, Rudolf Steiner that I think are a little bit like, it's not like a full on like one of the three major like Abrahamic religions, but those are the prophecies that I'm talking about. Those prophecies are manufactured, right? They are like being like, so
And they're
there's
all
certain,
connected. The
yeah,
three,
so
I think
there
you're
are
totally
technologies that like I believe that we are unaware of that are like making this sort of like prophecy happen, right? Like recently I saw like, that the Euphrates River is drying up, and there's all of these like these markers and these milestones, and I feel that they are being like created or engineered by like the predator class, or whatever you want to define that as. And so
totally.
I'm aware that too, it's really like a great place to be, where I feel like I'm at, where I know about that, or I know that that is a thing, but then I also like care about prophecy or like prophecy. So it's kind of like an interesting, because I know that it's being like totally like weaponized against people. There's people like praying into these books, right? And like they are like catching that energy, and then they're using it for like this, this
Yeah.
aim, I guess. So prophecy is like a tricky thing because I don't want to follow it too closely, because for me it takes me out of like what's shaped up to be the most juicy and delicious time of my life. Like the
Well, it takes
last few years, I mean, that I had a really difficult time, but like, holy shit, like I feel like I've come to just like this whole new place. Like I feel like I've been reborn in a lot of senses, where or born again or whatever, you want to
yeah.
say. And so, I don't know if you have any thoughts on anything that I've said. I've just been like rambling, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe in, I mean, there's no coincidence that all three of the big Abrahamic religions, all their end prophet, or whatever you will call it, they're all tied in together, right? Like, so the Messiah for, the Jews coming in, um,
That's right. Is the Antichrist in Christianity. That's the whole, this is it,
Jesus's
girl.
return, right? And then it's either the 12th or 13th Imam in Islam that's coming in. Like it's all ushering in this whole thing. So it's like it's all like there's no accident that all these books were written to, it's like a puzzle piece, and if you put it all together it's like, oh, that's interesting. However, when you're sitting in church or in temple or whatever, right, it's portrayed in a completely different way, right? So that you're like, oh, against this or against this. And when you sit to see this, again, so much of it is focusing on, and here's the interesting thing, I'm going to reflect on what you're saying, like as far as prophecy, right? When we focus on that, like you're saying, when we focus on that, we like we forget right here. We're not here then. We're not like present, right? We're not looking going, oh, because we're always looking outside. It's still prophecy in some ways can also be like a savior in a way too,
Sure,
because
it's not a replacement. I think this is what like I want, to like convey, is that like I mean, because I obviously like I collect these books, and like I've been so enjoying like,
yeah,
getting to know them. There are like other types of books like that, and like lectures that Steiner has given or whatever, that are like a bit more mechanical and like informative, that I also like. But um so I love it, I can't even deny it, but at the same time I think that there's a place where like it's not a replacement for your own experience or your own wisdom or your own gnosis that comes from, for me, like quiet time, which I'm not always the best at getting,
but that's it though. It's like our own gnosis. It's like our own knowing. It's our own and trusting in that space, right? And you can
yeah.
see how even over the last 100 years, a little bit more since even the school system, came into play, right? We're taking people starting when they're little away from who they are and from themselves and
Yeah.
from even asking questions, from knowing who they are, from even the basic of I have to go to the restroom, asking permission to do a basic, you know what I'm saying? Like all of those things play a part then in us not trusting ourselves and looking outside of ourselves for a quote unquote savior or for prophecy to go, oh, what's going to happen next? Versus going, oh, I'm going to just sit with everything. I'm just going to pay attention and I'm going to get curious and I'm just going to be with the energy and just see what comes up. What conversations am I around that I'm hearing, right? What am I noticing on Hulu or whatever? What am I even being influenced by, right? What am I being
Right.
drawn to? All of those things. I mean, that's, because,
That's mastery.
well, right. And then like getting in nature and like paying attention to even just everything, right? Like because
Yeah.
there's no lie in that, there could be lie in a book that's written by whatever with whatever agenda, but and even in Hulu and shit like that too, right? Absolutely, that could all be programmed. But it's like, what is, and it's even the question of, am I being programmed to be drawn to these things right now too, right?
Yeah.
So there's even that depth too that we can go in with ourselves, like why am I being programmed to being drawn, or why am I being drawn to this? Like, so I think that like getting curious and asking ourselves these questions are going to be so important, or we're going to get lost. We're going to get lost in the
Lost
dog.
in the sauce, girl. We are gonna get lost in the sauce. I think it's, yeah, it I
Yep.
think that we're gonna see, and this is just my honest truth, and I hate to say this way, but I think we're gonna see a lot of like, well, I think that this is going to be used to kind of like persecute or like come for in a way like the spiritual community. But I think that we're going to see a lot of people that have been like abusing their power in that sense. Like we're going to see them
Yes.
like it's
Well,
a wrap, right? So, yeah. And I think that that might be good,
yep.
but also I'm aware that within like the whole like of exposing the new age and exposing predatory teachers, even within that, like every day that that passes, even though I don't want to energize this, I can feel like that there's just a lot of scrutiny for like what, you know, spiritual teachers are saying or like the ideas that they are like, you know, and so it's just like this whole new level of responsibility, right? Of like, you know, being responsible for the information that you share, what you believe, why, like, and I think that that's part of why I've been so careful about like talking about this, even though I haven't really got into the part that I actually have to be careful about. But I'm sure that we will, you know, because I definitely want to have like more, I just want to expand and expand and expand on this. And
Yeah. I
I
think,
think that they're like, yeah,
well, I was gonna say, I think too, with responsibility, I think it's about responsibility also, not only our beliefs, but our responsibility of the emotions that
yeah,
come up within us when somebody else challenges our beliefs around this, or when somebody else does something different, right? Like it's being responsible for the emotions that we have even around it as well too, because that's going to be probably the most dangerous thing is the emotions that are tied to all of this programming, and it's all uh, that's what's gonna start the wars. That's what's gonna start the all the drama, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's like the more
absolutely.
on that for ourselves and go, oh wow, why can't I allow this other person to you know, do this? Why do I feel like I have to preach to them? Why do I feel like I have to control them? Why do I feel like I have to try to get them to come to Jesus because they're going to, whoa, what's going on within me that I'm trying to navigate this person's path when they haven't asked me to do that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so I feel like that's going to be the biggest thing. However, I mean, being real, I'm not trying to be an ass here or whatever, but most people aren't emotionally intelligent. They don't have that skill and they're going to get lost in that space within themselves. And it's going to get even more emotional and more everything. Every bit. I'm noticing it within myself. Every fucking thing, every emotion that is coming up within me, and this is probably not just myself, it's everybody, but like we are being challenged and we're being like, I don't want to say purged, but we have to navigate through every bit of fear, every bit of it's fear. It's all fear, right? It just comes out maybe in anger, it comes out in this, that, whatever thing, everything else. But it's like every little bit of it, it's got down to the law, religion, everything, science, all that kind of stuff. Everything is gonna, we have to face ourselves. That's the biggest thing. We have to face ourselves in this. And I think that's going to be the highest result with Saturn and Pisces. I think that's the highest, when I think about that, it's like could be the highest energy that could come from this is we all have this like we root into like going, okay, I'm going to face myself here. I am not going to run away. I'm not going to escape from myself. I'm not going to escape from this place, like, and face those things, within ourselves. However, I'm not trying to be again an ass. I just don't see a lot of people like, doing that. But I mean, it's
No, no, yeah, for sure. And I think that, yeah, I just agree with a lot of what you said. Feel that there's a component of this that does boil down to being very simple. I think somebody said recently, and I forgot who it was, like God is simple, right? Even though, of course, like I could like go on about like astrology and like the mechanics behind blah, 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 like different energy things. And, you know, God is simple. And I think the choice is like fear or love, like you're saying. And so,
I
and I think
love
that if there's like that, like it's like a moment to moment type of thing. And also like just having faith. I think that this transit is probably going to like test a lot of people's faith and then also reward people who hold on to it would be my assumption. And I really have enjoyed this. I look forward to talking with you about this again because there's a lot here.
It'd be cool too is we could even bring up, but I was looking into it the other day, like times in history when this has happened and even Saturn conjuncting Neptune and things like
Yes,
that.
let's do it. Let's do it. It's a very like holy war, like religious war kind of like it's a whole thing. And right, that kind of ties into like the whole Gog Magog thing. And I would love to talk to you more about that. And so, yeah, it looks like we have all of our material set up for part two of this. And yeah, where can people reach you?
Just my website, erinesser.com is best, or Facebook. I'm on Facebook still. And
Somehow.
I know, right? So yeah, that's the best. Just my website is the best. You can run your own free human design chart. Actually, on my website, I have all that software on there now, which is really cool
Okay.
and has a lot of information. If you go to some of the places, it's great. It just gives you a chart, but I have actually like information where if you're this, it gives you a little bit of snippet, so you can start to understand it a little bit if you're new to it. So yeah, just go to and that's all free. So you can go to erinesser.com and get download your free human design chart and check me out there.
Hell yeah. Thank you, girl. All right. Well, I will talk to you soon. And I hope that you have a beautiful day. Thank you for coming talking to me. Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
Meredith.